Hey, gang. John Cantera, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter here. And we're here today for the third installment of our transportation fraud prevention series, where we're going to be covering double brokering warning signs. In parts one and two, we went over some of the legalities and evolution of double brokering. In part two, we specifically focused on the different types of double brokering scams that exist out there and their variants. Well, today we're going to cover the warning signs in double brokering and offer a few examples of when you have bad rate confirmations and other documentation that shows you're probably involved in a scam. So before we get to that, a word from our sponsor, AccuBid Pro.
What is your cost per mile? Have you been hitting your profit margins? Do you struggle with bidding in a way that is both profitable and competitive? Would it be worth it to have all of this information right in front of you? By calculating your cost per mile, AccuBid Pro helps you stay profitable in an industry still struggling to recover. In order to calculate your cost per mile, AccuBid Pro asks you questions about your business expenses. Our goal is to help you understand what you need to keep operating in order to keep up with the game and maintain your business. Enter your origin and destination, and we show you what you should bid based on your personal cost per mile in order to be profitable. Bid smarter, bid faster, bid better with AccuBid Pro.
So let's go ahead and get right to it. The warning signs of double brokering. So carriers, there are a bunch of things that you can need to look out for. First and foremost, let me caveat all of this by saying no specific sign is an absolute certainty that you are dealing with a scammer. These are just warning signs. And by warning signs, we mean you need to stop and examine this broker, this person you're speaking to, with a bit more scrutiny. So, signs you need to be watching out for. First and foremost, are they factorable? Especially new carriers, you do not have a reliable revenue stream, which is why you typically run with a factoring company. So if you're not doing credit checks before you book a load to make sure you can use that broker and factor that broker, then you could be setting yourself up for some trouble. If you find out they are not factorable, now you're on your own to try to collect. That's not only an inconvenience, but factoring companies, if they discover that a brokerage is acting in bad faith, they will not factor them, and they will tell you that's why they don't factor them. So keep your eyes open for that. Another big one, and I would call this an almost absolute certainty, almost, is a broker set up through the platform known as RIGS, RIGZ. RIGS is a platform just like RMIS or My Carrier Portal or Highway, where you go in and you do a setup. You put in your financial information, you upload your documents, and then a broker affiliated with RIGS then gives you the load. Well, in over 300 investigations that I've done in 2022, every single one was a double broker scam. Every last one of them. So odds are, if they're asking you to set up through RIGZ, RIGZ, that's gorigs.com, I would just walk away from that. Just me saying. Another one is when a broker forbids a carrier from contacting the shipper or the receiver. There are lots of reasons why a carrier should be able to contact the shipper or receiver: to verify an appointment, to provide an update for an ETA. Even, frankly, in this day and age, a carrier has the right to call the shipper and verify who the freight broker for the load is. Now, here is a warning to you carriers out there. A lot of brokers are very, very sensitive to this particular issue, where if you contact their customer in any way, they may accuse you of back solicitation. Brokers, it is not back solicitation for a carrier to verify any information. What they cannot do, what is back solicitation, is if the carrier starts talking about money. Now we've entered into a gray area. So, carriers, be professional, be explicit in what you're asking for, and do not, under any circumstances, talk money when you're talking to a shipper or a receiver. But if the rate confirmation comes back to you expressly forbidding contact with the shipper or the receiver, that should be a red flag. Now, that being said, I have seen many rate confirmations for government loads where you're not allowed to do that. And there are security reasons for that. That's a different situation. Like I said, it's only a flag, it's not an absolute. If the broker directs check-in under a different carrier company name, huge red flag. Because remember, the BOL is a legal document, and whoever's carrier's name is on the BOL is supposed to be the carrier that gets paid for the load. So if the broker puts themselves as the carrier, that is improper. Is it universally accepted in the industry that brokers do that? Yes, it is. But it can be a problem for the broker if there's a claim on the load. Just throwing that out there. So brokers should be listed on the BOL as a third party. The carrier who's actually booked on the load should be listed in the carrier section. So if you are required to check in under a different carrier company name, I would be asking the shipper who the broker is for the load. It's not a problem to take the load. Just make sure when you have the load on your truck that you are having the necessary discussions and trying to figure out who the real broker is so that you will get paid for the load regardless. Or, frankly, you can refuse the load at that point because you're not the carrier who's supposed to be picking it up. You know, it's all about what's on that BOL. If the rate confirmation lacks detail, and I've seen this a lot, where the rate confirmation has minimal detail about the real carrier, has minimal detail about the broker, and only has an address for the pickup and the delivery and the rate. That's about it. That's not a very good rate confirmation. I would be asking questions in that particular situation. I've seen that being proper, but I always ask questions in that situation. If the broker is aggressive in tone and frequency of update requests, this was a lot more prevalent under traditional double brokering. However, we still see it happening with different types of double brokering scams today. The broker, the scammer is who I mean. The scammer is constantly contacting the carrier about updates. Hey, carrier, what's your ETA to pickup? Hey, carrier, have you arrived yet? Yes. Carrier, have you started loading yet? Hey, carrier, are you done loading? Hey, carrier, do you have your paperwork yet? Hey, carrier, give me a copy of your BOL before you leave. It's kind of insistent that whole series of questions and constant updates, you know, and it makes sense because the scammers use those updates to keep the real broker updated. And if they're feeding the real broker regular updates like that, the real broker gets lulled into a false sense of security, thinking that the scammer, who they think is the carrier, really has the load. Be careful in these types of situations. Now, there are some brokers out there who want to know when you arrive, who want to know when you start loading, who want to know when you leave, and yes, who will even want a copy of the BOL when you go to leave. It's not entirely unheard of, but In most cases, the broker is the one who sent the BOL to the shipper. So why do you need another copy? Just little things to question in your head. It's a warning sign, not an absolute. If a broker demands a copy of the BOL both upon pickup and delivery, again, the broker's the one who usually produced the BOL. Why do you need another copy? If the broker lacks knowledge of U.S. geography, to me, this is a big one, okay? Because if a broker doesn't understand where things are, how can they appropriately book a carrier for those types of requirements? I'll give you an example. In 2022, I booked a load where we were picking up 2 small crates going from Boston to Chicago. Well, when we arrived for the pickup, I called who I thought was the broker, advised him that we were on site and we were picking up, and it was around noon. He said, okay, just make sure you get there before 4 o'clock today. I said, whoa, Boston to Chicago by 4 o'clock today? Yeah. The rate confirmation says tomorrow. No, it's today. You need to get it there by 4 o'clock today. I said, it's 4 hours from now. He said, yeah. Dude, it's 1,000 miles. No, it's actually 800 miles. It's 800 miles. How the hell am I going to get there in 4 hours? I can't get there with a Formula One racer in 4 hours. Pretty damn obvious at that point. Once we got loaded and I got my hands on the BOL, sure enough, the load was double brokered. Got a hold of the real broker, ended up getting paid double for it. And I had until the next day to get it delivered. So everything worked out. If the broker lacks knowledge of U.S. geography, like I said, big one. English is not the broker's native language. It's just a sign. I am all for immigration. I am all for people who have emigrated into the United States to be working in this industry. They've got every right in the world to do so. But unfortunately, experience dictates that a lot of these scams are being perpetrated from outside the United States, Eastern Europe, Pakistan, India, etc. So with that being the case, it is at least a flag if English is not the native language of the broker that you're speaking to. Keep in mind, lots of brokers employ people from outside the United States, and they do that to maintain 24/7 coverage for their operations. So it's not unheard of for a legitimate broker to have people working in other countries. But it is a sign. When the BOL and the rate confirmation have differing details, this is really important. If you get a delivery order and a BOL and they differ in the delivery location, you're already asking questions as to where the hell this stuff's supposed to go anyway. But it could very well be a mistake made by the scammer who didn't put the right information in the documents, and boom, you instantly catch them in the act. It's a warning sign. At that point, I'm asking questions of both the shipper and the receiver to make sure this is going to the right freaking place. Or, as I said before, if the rate is abnormally high. And frankly, it's high or low. There are still some brokerages out there who double broker and who still pay the carrier what they promise while they're skimming off the top. It still exists. So keep your eyes out there. I call it my 20/20 rule. If it's greater than 20% variance from market rate, so 20% above or below market rate, you need to closely examine the documentation because you could be involved in a scam and not know it. Brokers and shippers, there are warning signs out there for you too. So carriers, this is what brokers are watching for. If you use Crossroads Services as a factoring company, brokers, that's going to be a problem. And if you haven't heard that by now, you've been living under a rock for the last 3 years. Crossroads Services is the financial arm of Riggs, R-I-G-Z. They are the outfit that's been financing that operation for years. If a carrier is presenting you credentials indicating Crossroads Services as their factoring company, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, it is usually a scammer utilizing a legitimate carrier MC to book a load and then rebrokering it using their legitimate broker authority. If you see a new or recent MCS 150 date on Safer for the carrier, that is something to ask questions about. Now, remember, people who own authorities are required to file an updated MCS 150 every 2 years. So if you don't do that, you lose your authority. So inevitably, a carrier is going to have a recent MCS 150 change. But when you have that, you need to utilize different mechanisms to try to determine whether or not the person you're speaking to is the real carrier or somebody impersonating the real carrier. Check for any kinds of complaints or issues on Carrier 411. Freight guards are a big thing. And, as much of a critic as I personally am of the freight guard program, it does have its place in the industry. I would say at least half of the freight guards that are out there are legitimate in one form or another. They may be an exaggeration, but they are legitimate. There are plenty, however, that are not legitimate and therefore destroying carriers, but that's a topic for another day. You also have Carrier OK, Carrier Assure, Highway. All the other platforms have their own form of reporting to alert brokers to potential issues. Be very careful, however, when you see that there is an active freight guard against the carrier that you are looking to book with. Review the freight guard before determining, no, you'll never use these guys. There are compliance departments out there at larger brokerages who do have the rule that if a freight guard exists, they don't use the carrier no matter what. If you are a broker who can utilize discretion, ask questions, contact the broker who issued the freight guard, find out what happened. Feel free to ask the broker or the carrier what happened in the situation. Trust me, they're more than happy to tell their side of the story. And then you can determine from there whether or not you want to take a chance. The next warning sign, a lack or loss of contact with the dispatch or the driver after a load is booked. We typically see this in cargo theft cases where basically the cargo just up and disappears. Thanks to tracking mechanisms these days, it's much harder for this to happen and for the cargo to be stolen. However, it all depends on how much the shipper and the broker are investing in fraud prevention tech. From miniature GPS receivers that transmit out the location of the cargo, and they can be embedded into the pallets. They can be hidden inside the cargo, all the way to the most common tracking software that exists out there that are tracking on drivers' cell phones, like MacroPoint. These are important. Now, if a driver intentionally shuts those off, okay, yeah, you probably got a problem. But maintaining contact is important. Carriers, the brokers are trying to keep contact with you because of the dollar value of the cargo that you're hauling. That's somebody's real money. So they've got a right to stay in touch with you about it. Don't just sit there and say, hey, broker, I don't want to talk to you. Talk to my dispatch. That isn't always the right answer. Be courteous, be professional. And trust me, you'll get a lot more work that way. Another warning sign for brokers, tracking failure with no explanation or contact. Yeah, we'll pretty much cover that. Another one for me is requesting quick pay when a broker is factorable. We have seen a lot in the last year where factorable brokers were being impersonated. And the carrier the scamming carrier asks for quick pay. That needs to be a red flag. It's so much of a red flag that some brokers have stopped doing quick pay altogether. All right, so that is something that brokers really need to consider when they are talking about working with certain carriers. If a broker is usually factorable and the carrier is asking for quick pay, the first thing I'd ask the carrier for is a letter of release from the factoring company. Now, if they tell you they don't have a factoring company, well, okay. But still, if they don't have a factoring company, why necessarily are they looking for quick pay? Sometimes it's a sign, sometimes it's not. But it's better to err on the uh, side of judgment here, because if you get it wrong, at least you investigated the situation and now you're comfortable with your decisions. If you have a sign there and you don't look into it, and then the car go up and disappears on you, shame on you, broker. So these next batch of slides are examples of posts and rate confirmations, some of which are real, some of which are fake. And we're going to cover why they're real and fake. So this first one here, this is off of DAT. Minneapolis to Elk River, Minnesota. 32 miles for $2,500. And you'd expect to see comments in there like round trip or multi-stop or something along those lines. But the comments say, email me. And it gives an email address at superprojectinc.com. The broker for this particular load happened to be Global Trans. Well, Global Trans doesn't use that. So that email, again, not a Global Trans email or a Global Trans company. And of course, the rate, definitely not realistic. This is a fake posting. In this particular case, a scammer got their hands on a Global Trans agent's DAT credentials and started posting a bunch of loads. This particular load turned out to be a load of scrap that someone was trying to steal. Here's another example. This is with, I want to say this was Ryan Transport. I don't remember off the top of my head. Chicago to Hawthorne, Nevada. It's got the good location, date, and times of pickup. The rate is within market norms. It's a little low for market norms, but it's within market norms. And very extensive description in the comment section. This particular posting, you guessed it, it is legitimate. Okay, those are the kinds of postings we like to see. Rate confirmations. Here's an example of a rate confirmation here. Is this good or is this bad? So take a look at the details on this, and can anyone identify any reason to think it's bad? Well, here's why. Lots of reasons. Different fonts. Okay. That font with the pro number, clearly somebody used Adobe and didn't line that up right. Another one is the email address being utilized for Brock Transportation is not brockweb.net. Okay, so pay attention to these types of details. Again, different fonts in the pickup section. You typically will not see that in a system-generated rate confirmation such as this. And the last key detail is that's an Amazon to Amazon move. And being Amazon to Amazon, that would never show up on another broker's post, let alone be posted out on DAT. Okay, that is always done through the Amazon Relay app. So this one is definitely bad. Here's another example here. Candor Expedite. Here's their rate confirmation. give you all a chance to take a look at this. There's one glaringly bad thing about this rate confirmation, and that is the email address. The email domain for the broker there is gmail.com. No legitimate broker is going to use a public domain email. And let me emphasize something here for carriers. If carriers, you are using a Gmail email address for your company email, you need to change. You need to get a unique domain, unique to your company. It only costs 10 or 20 bucks a year, but you need to do that because it makes it so much harder for a scammer to impersonate you when you have your own email domain. I'll give you an example. In the last week alone, I was assisting a carrier who got a freight guard for double brokerage. But the email that the broker sent the rate confirmation to was a Gmail email address. The carrier, being a 15 truck carrier, has their own email domain. Therefore, immediately we were able to prove that the Gmail email address did not match the domain for the real carrier, and the broker failed to check for that. Carriers, you need to check for that too. But if you have a Gmail email address, carriers, you need to upgrade. It's for your own security that you do that. And it's a very inexpensive step. Here's another rate confirmation, J&I Logistics. It's got the broker's info in there, jnilogistics.com. It's got details in there for the shipper and the consignee, fair amount of detail in there, specific weights, etc., etc. The only thing I saw on this that was weird is LTL under type is all lowercase. That's not typical compared to the rest of the information on the document. So I did ask questions about it, but at the end of the day, it is legitimate. Here's another one. Logistics Dynamics, LDI, fairly well-known broker out there. And here's the rate confirmation that the carrier has given us a copy of. Anybody see any issues on that? I know I do. Oregon to Nevada, 3,400 bucks. I'm already scratching my head. But also, bad fonts. It's the wrong email domain. I've worked with LDI many times. It's shipldi.com, not logisticdynamicsinc.com. Almost no carrier info beside the carrier name. Normally, that block's going to have the carrier's name, address, MC number, phone number, etc. And again, this is another Amazon to Amazon load. So this should have been done through the Amazon Relay app. At the end of the day, folks, verification is absolutely critical. And it is imperative that not only brokers are trying to verify carriers, but carriers, you have to verify the brokers. And brokers, you have to let them verify you. You are being impersonated just as much as carriers are. So verification is key for both sides. Okay, brokers, you have Safer, you have MCP, you have RMIS, you have Highway, Freight Validate, Carrier 411. You have all of those out there, but carriers don't have any of that they have access to other than Safer. Carriers can also get access to Freight Validate, but carriers are driving the truck, they're loading the cargo, they're doing all these extra things. They don't really have all the time in the world to go and get these verification tools and vet a broker and all this stuff. They don't typically have the time. So what they need to do when they're doing verifications is they can call the headquarters office for the brokerage. You know, if it's a Landstar load, you can call Landstar Corporate in Jacksonville, give them the load number and the lane, and they'll tell you whether or not it's valid. Pretty damn simple. to verify a Landstar load. All brokerages are willing to do this for carriers. Whatever you do, though, don't call the same guy again to try to verify the load he just gave you. Because if he's a scammer, of course he's going to verify the load is valid. So find another way to verify it. And if it's a small broker, call the shipper. Ask the shipper, what freight broker are they using on the load? There is no crime in doing that. There is no violation of the broker carrier contract for the carrier to call the shipper and ask, what freight broker are you using? There is no foul at doing that because the carrier still has to try to protect themselves too. They're not asking about money. They're not talking about rates. Therefore, it's not back solicitation. So brokers, be patient in this regard. You are being scammed as much as carriers are, and carriers have to protect themselves too. That's the end of section 3. If you need help with any kind of fraud issue, you think you've got a scam cargo on your truck, or you recently have covered a scammed cargo and are trying to make sure you get paid, reach out to us at Vigilant Transportation Services. Call me, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter, 912-346-8456, or email me at jcantera@vigilanttransport.com, or you can go through my website and send me a message. We are here to help in any way we can, and not just carriers, but brokers too. It's a bad industry out there, and there are a few of us out here who are trying to do what's right for the industry as a whole. Stay safe out there. And whatever you do, make sure that you don't let scammers take you for a ride. See you next time.